We are on week number 4 today, and the notes for this class, as usual, you can find at theregathering.com/page/PFT Hebrew 4. And of course, if this is your first time with us and you're wanting to learn Hebrew from the ground up, on YouTube at the Passion for Truth video channel, there's a playlist of, I think it's called Biblical Hebrew with Mark Jacob or something to that effect. But anyway, it goes through beginner, teaches you the letters and the vowels, and intermediate and advanced get into the grammar. And that brings us to the class translation where we are today, where we are actually starting to translate some Bible verses. So check that out. There's a whole list of that walks you through everything, and on the regathering there are notes that go along with all those things. So I encourage you to check that out if you're interested in learning some of the fundamentals of the Hebrew language. All right, so there are 2 verses on the agenda for today, and if we blow through those, I've got some bonus material lined up, so we'll see how it goes. The first one is Deuteronomy 11, verse 1, so you can open to that in your Hebrew Scriptures, or the notes contain that as well. And before I get into the entirety of the text, there are some words that I will give a definition to, so you recognize them when you see them. One of them is mishmeret. Mishmeret, you may be able to identify the root of this word. It is shin mem resh. There's our root. And shin mem resh means to guard or to keep. Mishmeret means a watch. Not a watch as in a wristwatch, but a watch as in an assigned time period for a watchman. So the idea is something that it's your responsibility to keep, to protect, to guard, because it's used in both literal and metaphorical senses. Okay, so that's a mishmeret. Mishpat. Mishpat is the root of that is shin pei tet, right here. And shin pei tet means to judge. And a mishpat is usually translated as a judgment. Hello. Usually translated as a judgment. And if you look at the laws, the category of laws that the term mishpat is typically applied to, it usually denotes a law that is deals with interpersonal interaction. So, laws pertaining to stealing and repaying, property, that sort of thing are usually referred to as mishpatim, okay, judgments. And then, get to this in a moment, but our next one is chok. Chok is usually translated statute, and it is a masculine noun, but the plural is chukot. Actually, it's made plural. This kuf takes a dagish. Chukot. All right. It's easier to say than chokot. Chot is usually translated statute, and this one's a little more difficult to pin down. In fact, I remember reading a rabbinic commentary one time that says that the chukot are mysterious laws. In other words, they can't come up with a rationale behind these. The chukot, frequently apply to things like sacrifices and other things where the physical connection between what you're doing and the end result isn't obvious. So, but that's kind of a really loose generalization of what a chok is. But anyway, these are different categories of laws. Okay, mishpat and chok, and then mishmeret is kind of an overarching term for your responsibility. What is yours to watch over? Okay, so with that being said, we shall dive into Deuteronomy 11:1. All right, and I have my handy Bible right in front of me, so I do not write the wrong words this time. We did get it right eventually last time, thanks to correction from the other people here. But no more shall we have that problem. Oh, and one other note, for those of you who've been watching these classes for a while, I understand that you can actually hear some music in the background sometimes. That is not your computer, not anything going wrong. The Hebrew class time here at Passion for Truth overlaps with the worship practice time, which is directly above us. And so sometimes you can apparently this mic can actually pick up the worship practice. So that's what's going on if you've been hearing that, and if you continue to hear that now. Nothing to be alarmed over, no technical difficulties. That's just literally the sounds that are coming through this space. So, all right. So Deuteronomy 11, verse 1. Ve'ahavta, it starts. And we should recognize this verb from last week. All right, we can separate our prefix and suffix right away. Vav we recognize as a prefix. The ta at the end we should recognize right away as a suffix, leaving us with aleph hey beit, which means to love. Okay, ahav ta is the second person masculine future tense, singular. So this means, this is the past tense. Ahav ta means you loved, you masculine singular, loved. And the vav inverts, so this means and you will love. Okay, ve'ahavta et, so what comes next is the direct object. The subject is already inside the verb. The subject is you. Okay, since this is a second person form, we already know the subject. It's not necessary to specify any further. So ve'ahavta et, here's the direct object. Yahweh Elohecha. And we should recognize that from last week as well. In fact, we have this exact same phrase in Deuteronomy 6. Okay, you shall love Yahweh, your Elohim, Elohecha. That cha at the end is the masculine singular pronominal suffix. So it's God of you. All right, so ve'ahavta et Yahweh Elohecha. Okay, v'shamarta. And this is the exact same form as ve'ahavta. Okay, so since it's the same form, we already know that what we've got is a second person masculine singular past tense that's being inverted by the vav, so it changes it to future tense. Okay, so it's and you will something. We know that just based on the form and the vowels alone. Because of these vowels, this prefix and this suffix. Same form as ve'ahavta, but v'shamarta. And shamar means to guard or to keep. And shamar is used very frequently in regard to keeping laws, in regard to keeping commandments and that sort of thing. It can also be used in a sense of physically guarding something, okay, physically protecting something. But the majority of the time it's used in the scriptures, it is in fact talking about keeping laws. So v'shamarta, and you will keep. Mishmarto. Mishmarto. Okay. Mishmar to, you should be able to see this O at the end. All right, that is our pronominal suffix. That means he or his. The rest of this is mishmeret. Okay. So you shall keep his watch, or sometimes this is translated as charge, because it's something you have charge of, okay, something you are assigned to protect. So you shall keep, or you will keep his charge. And before we go further in this sentence, I want to point something out, and this is something we'll see in Genesis 26 as well. There's no et. There's no et in this sentence. We've got a subject, but we don't have an et signifying our direct object. And I encourage you, when you're constructing sentences in Hebrew, to always use et. Okay? No, I'm not saying this is written incorrectly at all, because it isn't. But my encouragement to anybody starting with Hebrew is always use et for clarity. Okay? That way there's no possible way anything can be misinterpreted. Incidentally, it's more efficient in this case not to use et, because there's no way that this can be misinterpreted. The subject is built into the verb. Okay? So shmarta means you will keep, and whatever comes after has to be the object. It can't be the subject of the verb. Right? The subject's already attached to the verb. So the et is technically not necessary here. However, we saw that in the sentence before, okay, v'ahavta et Yahweh Elohecha. All right, so the et was used there even though it wasn't necessary, but now it's being withheld here. Okay, again, there's no reason that it has to be there because it's very clear what the subject of that sentence is. It's not saying Yahweh your God will love you in that sentence. It's saying you will love him. But for whatever reason the et was added, it's not correct or incorrect to add it or withhold it. It just adds sort of extra clarity, if you will, to the sentence. But in this case, the et is not there, and you'll find this throughout the scriptures where you have sentences that don't have ets in them to indicate the objects. And usually that is because either it's not totally necessary, as in this case, or because context has only one sensible interpretation. And if we do blow through these and get to our last verse, you'll see a case of that, where it doesn't make any sense to have, to reverse the subject and object from the way they're traditionally translated, so we don't. Even though grammatically it could be constructed that way. But this grammatically cannot be constructed any other way, because the subject is already built into the verb. Okay, so the et is not necessary.
I just noticed it's not an et in this verse, it's an eight.
It is an et. The vowel is different, but that is because of the vowel that precedes it, because it's preceded with an ah.
Even though it's not connected necessarily.
This is why I don't put a lot of emphasis on particular vowels, because they change so haphazardly. So patterns and patterns and roots are much more key to focus on than particular vowels. Although sometimes the particular vowels do indicate slight differences in concept. Okay.
I just love how they interpreted it as therefore. That was not there.
Yeah. Well, that's
Let's just say that that's as eight as the day.
well, the therefore is actually translating the vav.
I would agree.
Yeah, some translations of Deuteronomy 11:1 say therefore at the beginning. He's mentioning that there is no actual word that could be translated that in the verse, but that's their idea of the sense of the vav at the beginning, v'ahavta, because and is the most straightforward translation, but since the vav is used everywhere as any continuation of any text into another one, and even at the very beginning of a text that has nothing before it, like the beginning of Leviticus, Yeah, Vayikra. It's like that's the first, the very first thing that's said. Anyway, so there's a little bit of license to fill in whatever English preposition you wish or conjunction you wish to kind of go there, as long as it fits the context. But King James usually defaults to and. So that's what I'm familiar with, but you can make an argument for inserting other words places. I think you have to be very careful about when you do that, though. You can't just throw it in there whenever you feel like it. You have to have a really good justified reason for doing so. Okay, so you will keep his charge. And this is another, on a tangent, just a point that you'll run into in biblical Hebrew and in modern Hebrew for that matter. A lot of times you have these things that they're almost redundancies. Since these both have the same root, a mishmeret is by definition something that you shamar. Okay. What this means is something that is kept, and it's saying you shall keep something that is kept. And so it's
Unless you break it.
yeah, I mean it's the same root. It's like the same word repeated almost, in a sense. So so yes, it's a poetic form, but it's a form that's used over and over and over and over and over again, where you see roots repeated, you see a verb and then a noun that's derived from that verb. And so anyway, just something to point out, this is not the only case where you'll see that. You'll see it time and time and time and time again. You don't even have to look for it. You'll run into it by accident. Okay? So you shall keep his charge or his watch. Okay? Okay, the chukotiv. It is.
So why has it got a masculine yod there? Because it is masculine.
Because in fact it is masculine. Now, if you recall from the possessive pronominal suffixes, though, these endings, these plural endings, occur even when you have a feminine plural. So that yod pops in there for plural pronominal suffixes even when the ending is actually a tav. Okay, so here we can, of course, we recognize our vav is a prefix. And this iv is a suffix. All right? Vav, of course, means and. Iv is the possessive pronominal suffix that means his, but it's attached. We saw in mishmar to, it was singular. Iv is the plural his. He isn't plural, but the noun that is being possessed is plural. Okay? Okay, so you shall keep his charge and his chukot, his statutes. It'd be interesting to look up.
No.
He's saying the first mishmeret in the scriptures.
There's no charge.
Oh, okay, I got you.
It's one singular. I'm
Okay.
just curious.
So the chukotiv, umishpativ,
That's his charge.
Yeah.
Normally this would like add before the second or
Okay, so same situation. Vav prefix and our iv suffix. All right, So mishpat, the plural is mishpatim. Okay, but when we make it, cause it to be possessed, that im drops off and is replaced by the ive suffix. Okay.
Mentioned one other place last week's school portion where it talks about Abraham keeping his charge.
That's actually the next verse that we're going to talk about.
That's the only time it's mentioned.
Really?
Yeah.
Well,
In the book of Genesis.
what a crazy happenstance then, huh?
It's interesting.
Okay, so umishpativ, and we're continuing with the objects here. So we've got mishmarto, all right, his charge, uchukotiv, and his statutes, umishpativ, and his judgments. You see with translating these things, a lot of times the forms are repeated, so you only have to identify what you're looking at once, and then that form gets continually repeated. You don't have to figure out, wait, no, this is the masculine singular form, this is something else. It's usually consistent through the text. So that's helps when you're starting out looking at these things, that you don't have to figure out every single little aspect. Okay, umitzvotiv. We already know mitzvah is a commandment, so mitzvot is commandments. So mitzvotiv, his commandments, umitzvotiv, and his commandments. All right? And then we have a phrase to finish out, kol hayamim. Now this okay, kol of course means all. Hayamim, I don't know if I ever talked about the plural of the word yom, but yom is day, and I should have, if it's not included on whatever vocabulary sheet introduces yom, I should have mentioned that it has an irregular plural. But if I forgot to do that, I'm telling you now that the plural of yom is not yomim, as we would expect, but is yamim. The vav drops off in the plural form. Okay, so yom becomes yamim. All right, so we've got our definite article in front of yamim, so that would literally be the days. So literally translated, this phrase would mean all the days. However, we can't translate it this way because that doesn't make any sense. All the days of what? And if, you might think, well, maybe verse 2 indicates all the days, what it's all the days of. It doesn't. Verse 2 starts with a verb. So this is meant to be taken just as it is. It is an idiom. I remember, you remember talking about hayom, okay, the term the day, and that meant today. All right, it's not to be translated as the day. It's meant to be translated today, as in the day that we're in right now. This phrase, kol hayamim, means all your days, okay, all your life. That's how this is meant to be taken. It's an idiomatic expression. Okay, now, this could be, they could say all your life another way. Okay, it'd be kol chayato, I believe, or just chayecha. Actually, would be how that would be done. Kol chayecha, all your life, but kol hayamim is the idiomatic expression, and so that presents a question: why do they use the idiomatic expression? Or why does the idiomatic expression exist instead of saying what they mean to say anyway? Well, this has the added dimension by singling out the idea of the day. We mentioned this with the term hayom, which means today. By singling out the day, it brings it into sort of a present tense focus. Okay, all your life is kind of like this, well, as long as you're here kind of thing, but kol hayamim kind of has this added indication of each and every day. So it's not thought of as this fuzzy thing, fuzzy entity, but no, every, the span of your life is composed of each day of your life. And so that's kind of the idea of what's being gotten at. Okay, you should keep these every day, not just, I did more than I didn't kind of thing. So, okay, so any questions about Deuteronomy 11, verse 1?
Would interest you to know the first time that we're told to shamar is in Genesis 2:15, whenever we're told to keep the garden or to dress it is how it's interpreted?
Yes.
So I wonder if that has any relation to the first thing where he says that Abraham was able to keep or take charge of his charge.
Right. Yes. Yes, Robbie was just mentioning the first time that the verb shamar is used, shin mem resh, which means to keep or to guard. It's used in context of keeping the Garden of Eden in Genesis 2.
The outsiders.
Right. So to and it's usually translated as to I think to dress. It's actually a two-word phrase. Yeah, it's shamar, and then there's another one. But anyway, it actually does say to keep, I believe, in the King James, to dress it and keep it. So yeah, so that's the original context is protecting this garden, protecting this place where things are great. And so some of that connotation kind of trickles down to later talking about Israel keeping the commandments. So, just on a side theological note.
What are we charged? What's the charge?
Right. If Adam keeping the garden means he's doing these things in order to maintain an environment in which that promotes life and that promotes, sort of the utopia, if you will, that Eden was, then Israel is charged with keeping these regulations, doing things a certain way in order to promote life and general happiness and welfare in Israel.
It goes back to the
So.
original charge not to eat the tree. Maybe that's what Abraham did, was he did not mix this.
Alternatively, yes, you could think of it as being the one commandment they had, which is don't eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So, anyway, there's
There's a wellspring of theological debate.
indeed you can get a lot from that, but yes, the term does go back even to the Garden of Eden. So that's an interesting note, and I'm sure if you did a word study on shamar, you'd come up with all kinds of fun stuff. So. But yes, that is an interesting note for sure. Any other comments or questions? All right. Okay, well, in the vein of going back to related verses, our next one is Genesis 26, verse 5. And it's a little bit awkward to translate this verse standalone because it really is a continuation of the verse before. But I have not taught all of the requisite things to translate the verse before, so we're going to just start in verse 5. That's the one I would want to get to anyway, but you'll see right at the beginning that it's kind of jumping in midstream. Okay, so this is not the beginning of a paragraph, but we're jumping in part way. It starts, Akev Asher. It is indeed. Akev Asher. Now again, this is a continuation of the narrative, so we're kind of jumping in midway here. Akev basically means because. Now, of course, ki means because. And you'll see frequently that there are a number of prepositions and combinations thereof that are used for ideas like because, or, of course, ki can be used in that sense. But even in Genesis 3, the term off, which usually means anger, is used to mean indeed. And I've looked at that time and time again, and there's no other reasonable translation that I can come up with. So, sometimes these words kind of pop in, and perhaps there's some original sense that's really obvious to the people who wrote it that's not obvious to us. But Akev actually survives as a word that means because to this day. But off, which means anger in Genesis 3, does not. It just means anger now. So, but in any case, this whole phrase Akev Asher, right, because that, it's kind of an awkward introduction in English, but or an awkward phrase in English, but it kind of it's sort of an unorthodox way, if you will, of presenting the idea. The verses before this, just to encapsulate them, talk about how God's going to keep His promise to Abraham to multiply his seed, and all the nations of the earth will be blessed through him. And so this is giving the sort of rationale, if you will, of why He's going to follow through on that, other than just keeping His word. It's kind of a phrase that means, okay, now why all this is coming to pass is because of this. Okay, because that. So, again, we're jumping in midstream here. Okay. Akev Asher Shamang. All right, just looking at this, even if we don't know what it means, again, look at the pattern. 3 letters, Kametz Patach, looks right away like a third-person masculine singular past tense verb in Binyan Pa'al. Okay? Kametz Patach is a pattern that you'll see time and again. It's the most common verb pattern. So this would mean he did whatever this verb means. Okay? So because that, and Shamang, this is same thing we see in Deuteronomy 6, hear or listen. So because he heard, who heard? There's no subject attached yet. Indeed. Avraham. Well, I don't need to write out Avraham. It's Abraham, okay? The one thing I would like to point out, though, is a lot of times when you're reading, if you don't have like an interlinear and you're just reading through, you might come across a name and try to translate it as a word. Sometimes you can. But a lot of times you'll try to do that and say, wow, that doesn't make any sense at all. That's because it's a name. It's talking about a person. So that's where helps to know how names are spelled. Avraham you would probably recognize from just pronouncing it. Wait, Avraham. Oh, Abraham. But Isaac is a Yitzchak, and you may not derive that if you didn't already know that Yitzchak was a name. So you'd be coming up with, he will laugh. He will laugh, he will laugh. What's going on here? So anyway, but Avraham is in fact a name. So he's the subject of this verb. So because that Abraham listened or heard, what did he hear? Now normally we'd have an et here, but as I mentioned, it is absent. However, it's also not necessary here. because the koli, okay, so again we can separate this out. Beit shva, instantly we know in or with. And e at the end means my, okay, the first person singular possessive pronominal suffix. Okay, so we were left with kol. Yes, kol, in its alternate spellings, it can have the full cholam or the defective. Kol means, it can mean two things. It can mean a voice, or it can mean just a sound. Yeah, or a cry, but this could be rendered, though, because he listened to my voice. You might say, well, beit always means in or with. How can you translate that to? Shouldn't it be a lamed? Well, in this case, no.
I saw it translated many times today as for.
Mm-hmm. Yes. The sense of in or with is usually maintained by the beit, but it also has these sort of additional senses as well. In English, we can't say, he heard with my voice, or he heard in my voice. That doesn't make any sense. But if we're to take the term to literally, then it doesn't make sense to say he listened to my voice in English either. Like he listened to my voice? Like, what does that even mean? So, but he listened in my voice literally actually makes a little bit more sense, even though it's not the vernacular that we use.
Jacob worked in Rachel and in Leah to try to earn them.
Mm-hmm.
It's a weird.
Yes, so these prepositions are have some fluidity to them. But the idea, though, is he listened to my voice. All right, that's the most sensible translation given what shamang means and given what kol is. He heard my voice is kind of the idea here. Why don't we need an et? Well, because this starts with a preposition. Okay, Abraham listened to my voice. There's no need for an et indicating the object, because to my voice heard doesn't make any sense at all. The preposition has to attach the word before to the word after. So, no need for an et here. But if it said Shamang Avraham et koli, that would be just fine as well. Okay, and that is how I would write it if I were writing a sentence. Again, that doesn't mean this is wrong, because of course it isn't. The Bible's where we get Hebrew from, so it's not wrong. Okay, and I'm not saying that it should be any other way. But what I'm saying is, for clarity in your sentences, use et. All right? But just understand that that's not always going to be the way that things are presented. So you have to be familiar with these other forms as well.
Vayishmar.
Yes, vayishmar. All right, and we saw, of course, shmar before. But now, Deuteronomy 11 was talking about future tense. And that is Vayishmor. Okay. Okay, Vayishmor. So Deuteronomy 11 was talking about the future tense, so the vavs were always inverting past tense verbs. But here we're talking about the past, so this vav is now inverting future tense verbs. Okay. Yishmor on its own would mean he will keep. That's our third person, masculine singular future tense. So we're still talking about Avraham here. He's the one subject that's been mentioned, so he's still the subject of this sentence. All right, so because that, Abraham listened to my voice and he kept, because the vav inverts. Again, we have a lack of an et coming forward. but again, it's not totally necessary. Okay, Mishmar T. Now, Deuteronomy 11 is Moses talking, and Genesis 26 is God talking. So that's why Deuteronomy 11 refers to it as his charge, or his watch. Deuteronomy 26 refers to it as Mishmar T, my charge, or my watch. And the exact same thing that's going on in Deuteronomy 11. So this is the same term. So we've already got a parallel. All right, keeping the charge. As Robbie mentioned, this is the first time that Mishmeret is used in the Tanakh. So it's probably significant. Mishmar T. And there's an interesting thing here, too. The next word is mitzvoti. Now, this verse is very much paralleling Deuteronomy 11, or you might say that Deuteronomy 11 is paralleling this, regardless of which way you take that, they're connected to each other, because they're using the same terms. But do you notice a difference? Deuteronomy 11 is, of course, in the future tense, so it's saying, you will keep my charge, and then it's got this list of things that you will keep. Notice a difference, though, between the form of that list and the form of this one. Without having both of them right in front of you, it might be hard to see. You can probably see it online with the two verses juxtaposed. The items in the list in Deuteronomy 11 are connected with vavs. So, Mishmarto, v'chukotaiv, v'mishpataiv, okay, v'mitzvotaiv. All right, they're all connected with vavs. However, this is a list of things that all go together, and they are not connected with vavs. These are all the object of the sentence, just like they were all the object of the sentence in Deuteronomy 11, but this is a list that's basically separated by invisible commas instead of by the word and. And this is another thing that you will find. Both forms of things can be strung together with or without vavs. All right, when they're a list of things that are all meant to be the object of a sentence, or just a list in general. Sometimes you'll have vavs connecting them, and sometimes you will not. So this is a great example of both. All right, mitzvoti, my commandments. We've got the E ending. Actually, mitzvotai, I'm sorry. Not mitzvoti. It has to be I because this is a plural noun. All right. So, Ekev Asher, Shamar Avraham, Mishmarti, Mitzvotai. Okay, so my charge, singular, my commandments, plural. Chukotai, my statutes, plural. Vitorotai. I think it's spelled irregularly here, actually. Yes. And yes. All right, so what's this word? Take the vav off the beginning right away. I ending off right away. Okay. Torot. It's the defective plural of Torah. And Torah, of course, is a code or body of laws. Oh, it's a common sense. Yes. Yes, it is a comments instead of a pata because we're at the end of a verse and vowels lengthen at the end of a verse for some reason that I still have yet to understand. So, but this is still the first person plural, or it's first person singular ending attached to a plural noun. So and my laws, or and my Torahs, as it were. All right, so that is Genesis 26:5. Before we do some compare and contrast, any questions or comments about Genesis 26:5? Okay, well, if you think of any, interrupt me. So very clearly these verses are related because they use the same verb and most of the same objects. All right, it's talking about keeping and then this list of things. So there's a clear connection between these two verses. They're expressing the same ideas. But there are some differences, as pointed out. Genesis 26 is talking about the past. Deuteronomy 11 is talking about the future. The list in Deuteronomy 11 is connected with vavs. The list in Genesis 26 is not. There's another difference, and that is one term. Deuteronomy 11 has mishpat. Okay, so mishpataiv, his judgments, and Genesis 26 has torotai. Okay, my laws. And I'm pointing that out not so much to give an explanation for that as just to point it out, but one possible idea would be, since the mishpatim typically refer to interpersonal relationships or intranational relationships, as it were, relationships between an Israelite and another Israelite, although they have application beyond that. I'm not saying that's what they're limited to, but basically Deuteronomy 11 is addressed to a nation of people who are all agreeing together that they're going to keep this set of laws. And Abraham was basically a nomadic wanderer who didn't have a community that he was a part of aside from his own band of people. So to say he kept the mishpatim would be a little bit of a stretch because he has nobody to steal from or to steal from him. He certainly has no court system to go to work out any differences he has with the people around him. And Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob all had this problem. Okay, that's just as an aside. That's one of the reasons that Jacob was so angry with Simeon and Levi when they did what they did after what happened to Dinah. He's like, they're gonna, we're gonna, after word of this gets out, they're gonna just extinguish us. You took this into your own hands because there was no judge to go to. But now it's just law of the jungle. Now we're just going to get eliminated. So they had to exercise, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob had to exercise a great deal of wisdom and restraint because they were basically alone and kind of fending for themselves in the situations they were in. So they couldn't, they had to really be tactful about how they dealt with the people they encountered because they had no nation, no country, that had their back. So, and it's kind of one of the reasons that the country or nation of Israel was such a big deal. All right, they had advantages that the patriarchs did not. And so anyway, that's one potential explanation for why Mishpatim is not applied to Abraham, because he's not part of that community kind of system really yet. He's, just outside of his own little mini community that was his family and servants. So, but anyway, that's just a contrast, which I don't have a total explanation for why it says Torah in Genesis 26 and doesn't mention it in Deuteronomy 11, I don't know. But nevertheless, the verses are clearly related to each other. So I wanted to point out both of those and show that we can actually go through them and interpret them very, it's not terribly difficult, all right, just using the rules that we've got. So any other comments or questions on that?
the lists in the same order, except for the Mishpat Torah?
If I recall, let's see, we've got Mishmeret. No, they are not. Chuk, Chok is first in Deuteronomy 11, and then Mishpat, and then Mitzvot. And in Genesis 26, it goes Mitzvot, Chuk, and then Torah. So no, they're not in the same order. Mishmeret is still in the same spot. Right.
But does it say a Shemor, or does it say a Shemer?
Where's that?
I'm just wondering how Shemar is conjugated.
Yeah, well, it's Vishamarta
There you go.
in Deuteronomy 11, so it's inverting the past tense, and Genesis 26 is inverting the future tense.
Yeah,
So
it's a second person versus first person.
right. Yeah, second person versus third person. So
But I think I know why the Talmud says that an Israelite can now lie to and or cheat a non-Israelite.
Oh.
Because they're taking it all the way back to Abraham and saying, well, Abraham lied to Pharaoh
right.
and lied to Abimelech, and they weren't part of Israel, so therefore we can do the same.
Yes, there's a great danger in extrapolating moral principles that aren't clearly being
Because they're saying that Abraham
forwarded by the
kept all of
text.
the Torah.
Yes.
So if Abraham did it, then we can do it.
Yes. Interestingly, though, it doesn't mention the Mishpatim in connection with Abraham.
Yeah, that's what
So
So there's something that he wasn't keeping, however they're told to keep.
yes, you always have to be careful with. I'm going to go on a moral tangent here, though. You always have to be careful with, extrapolating things that justify what you're already doing, okay, from a text that you're claiming to be submitted to. And
Self-understanding.
every single human being has that tendency, okay? It's innate within us. It's just something that, we need to be aware of when we're looking at these things. Oh, well, there's this loophole over here, so that justifies what I'm already doing or what I'm already comfortable doing. So that must make it okay. It's like, well, no, if you're going strictly by what the text is trying to say, then you have to take the text on its own terms. You can't try to find all these little loopholes and things and claim an honest derivation from the text. So now, if you want to make the case that the text doesn't prohibit what I already want to do, then that's fine. Make that case. I'm just saying, from the basis of intellectual honesty, you have to be careful how you take these extrapolations. And context, of course, is important. Context is always important with interpretation. So.
Rabbi Zechariah saying once, for every text you have to have a context, or else it will become a pretext.
Yes. Yes, an excellent quote that is, too.
Without the context, you have a church that does whatever it wants.
Well, yeah.
It becomes a pretext for
Right. Yeah, it's a concise way of saying what I just said. So, okay. Anything else?
Pick a random person.
Yeah, I don't think we have time to get to the bonus verse, as it were. We're going to go into some, a little more, some additional subject material next week. So we're going to need a few more tools to interpret the next verses we're going to do. So we'll get to that. Like I say, this is not a comprehensive overview of the entire Hebrew language, but I'm just giving the tools necessary to translate the verses I wanted to get to. And hopefully this forms sort of a backbone for continuing studies, as it were. Which reminds me, I will at some point give some recommendations on sort of follow-up materials that you can use to continue your learning of Hebrew. I've been asked that several times, and I've been hesitant to give an answer because most of what I learned I actually got from a tutor. So he used a variety of materials. I did self-study with a few books, but I wouldn't actually recommend those books, not because they're bad, but because they're geared towards a certain background. One is geared toward somebody who's already a linguist, and another is geared towards somebody who only wants to learn modern conversational Hebrew. And since I haven't used any other sources, I don't personally have experience with things to recommend, but I'll check into that a little bit, and because I want to give a little bit of something to go off of for continuing from here. I don't want to just leave everybody hanging. So anyway, all that being said, we'll pick it up again next week, and till then, shalom.